Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tenant Talk Live. Welcome, welcome. Feel free to share your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Feel free to drop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We'll give it just a few minutes here before we get started, but thank you everybody who's joining. And again, feel free to drop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We have Elizabeth here joining us from Detroit, Michigan. Mary joining us from Eastern Michigan. Welcome, welcome. We have AJ joining us from Wisconsin. Nice to see you again, AJ. It's good to see y'all's faces too. This is like the second time I've done it in meeting style, so it's nice to see y'all. And I'm happy you get to see us too. Let's see, we have Jennifer joining us from Texas, Kim joining us from DC, and Tommy Renee joining us as well. Cool, we'll give it another 3 minutes or so, just letting people in from the waiting room. We have V joining us from Missouri. Good to see you here again, V. Hi, Marsh. Good to see you again from Oregon. Awesome. We have some more folks coming in, so I'll give it a few minutes. For those folks that just joined us, feel free to drop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We'll get started momentarily. Hello, hello, new folks. Tommy Renee just shared that they're from Oregon too. We have Sue joining us from Seattle. And if you're just joining the conversation, feel free to drop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. I'll go ahead and just get us started. We have a few guests joining us today, so I'll go ahead and just start us off. And again, my name is Sid Betancourt. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a housing advocacy organizer with the coalition. And before I forget, if any of my colleagues can just help me out with letting folks in from the waiting room, that would be great. And for those that are new here, you're currently joining Tenant Talk Live, where we provide opportunities for folks with lived experience to connect with one another, share best practices, and learn how to get more involved in influencing federal housing policies. And today we're going to be hearing from a few folks. So we'll be hearing from NLIHC's very own Kayla Laywell and Kim Johnson to learn more about the upcoming request for information from the Federal Housing Finance Agency. And we'll also have Gina Wilt from the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, also known as COHHIO, to discuss their advocacy work. But before I invite our panelists to come on for today, I'm going to share our usual community agreements that we talked about at the beginning of this year. And again, if you have any feedback, or if you want to change anything, add anything, please feel free to let me know. But again, I'm just going to leave these up while I go up through the rest of the updates that I have for today's call. So again, you can feel free to sign up for NLIHC emails at the link that we're going to drop in the chat, and just make sure that you sign up for the connection emails. That way you're able to receive like a recap of this call, including notes, the recording, emails of panelists, and any other relevant information that we share on the call today. And also I would say most urgently and importantly, I just want to thank you all for all of the feedback that you have provided in the last few months on the draft that NLIHC and the National Housing Law Project has been working on regarding the Tenant Bill of Rights. It's a really big legislative effort and we couldn't do it without y'all. So we really just want to make sure that we receive y'all's feedback on the work that we've been doing. And so if possible, I think Gabby has a copy of the document, but I know Kayla does too. We just want to provide that document for you all in the chat. And if you're interested in providing any feedback, please try to do so as soon as possible. We're asking for feedback by today, but any feedback is good. And I know some of y'all have already emailed me some because I got it right after I sent out the e-blast this afternoon. And then in terms of just tenant talk and other tenant engagement opportunities, we have an upcoming edition of Tenant Talk, the publication, which will be centered around LGBTQ+ issues and the intersection of housing and homelessness. And we'll be doing a cover art contest. So if you want your art featured on the cover of the next edition, you can submit your art to the link that we'll put in the chat by May 26th, end of day. Participants have to be 18 plus or older. And the winning submission will be featured on the cover of the forthcoming edition of Tenant Talk, and the creator itself will be awarded $250. So if you have any questions, feel free to email outreach@nlihc.org. And again, we're going to include the link to submit your art in the chat. And NLIHC is also currently recruiting for members of the 2023-2024 Tenant Leader Cohort. And for folks who don't know what the cohort is, it's a group of tenant advocates and community leaders with lived experience of housing insecurity who work towards housing justice and racial equity within their neighborhoods and also the greater community and at the federal level. NLIHC collaborates a lot with this group to not only inform our policy priorities, but they also get to do a lot of other cool things like participate as a moderator on Tenant Talk Live, help out with federal comment periods and different things like that, just to make sure that all of those activities best reflect the needs of low-income households and renters across the country. So if you're interested in being part of next year's cohort, please fill out the interest form in the chat. We'll also host another information session on Saturday, June 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we have the registration link for that in the chat as well. So we'd love to have y'all join us. We'll be choosing folks for that cohort in June, probably early to mid-June, around the time that we have like that second session. So excuse me, please feel free to sign up. And then lastly, for some logistics, if you can't already tell, we are recording the session to be viewed later by folks. So please just keep that in mind in case you don't want to share like sensitive information or anything like that. And if you have any questions, just make sure you drop them in the chat and we'll be moderating those for y'all. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and again, if you have any feedback on our community agreements, please feel free to email us or drop it in the chat. And with that, I'll hand it over to our first guest. Kayla and Kim, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Sid, and hi, everyone. I'm Kim Johnson. I'm Policy Manager here at the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and I'll pass it on over to Kayla to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Kayla Laywell. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a housing policy analyst here at the National Low Income Housing Coalition.
I also use she, her pronouns. So Kayla and I are here today to flag for you all an upcoming opportunity to weigh in with the federal government about some important tenant rights. So for a little bit of background, this is going to be a commenting opportunity for the Federal Housing Finance Agency, or the FHFA. And the FHFA is responsible for supervising, regulating, and providing oversight for the Federal National Mortgage Association, aka Fannie Mae, the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, also known as Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Bank System. So those are the three kind of big federal mortgage providers in the country. And the FHFA was created in the wake of the 2008 economic crisis in order to make sure that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation are operating in safe and sound manners, and to avoid any kind of future housing market crashes like we saw in 2008. So those three entities, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, provide more than $8.1 trillion in funding for the nation's mortgage markets and financial institutions. And as such, they provide vital financing for housing development. Our colleagues at the Urban Institute estimate that more than 1/4 of all rental units in the United States, including nearly half of all units in multifamily properties, and 12% of units in smaller scale properties like single family homes or buildings with less than 5 units, are all financed with federally backed mortgages from one of those three entities regulated by the FHFA. And so what we wanted to flag for you is that in the next few weeks, likely by the end of the month or in early June, the FHFA is expected to release a request for information on how the agency can create and enforce renter protections for the households that are living in properties with an FHFA-backed mortgage. And because of the broad reach of the FHFA, these renter protections that come out of this process could cover a significant share of renters across the nation and really lay the groundwork for stronger protections for all tenants. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Kayla to talk about some of the work that we're doing to prepare for this RFI and how we're hoping tenants will get engaged in order to weigh in and make sure their voices are heard.
Thanks, Kim. So again, like Kim said, we are expecting the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, a lot of acronyms. We're expecting the FHFA to release this request for information on whether or how they should establish renter protections for the more than 12 million renters living in properties with federally backed mortgages. Any renter protections that they could put in place would be historic. So we want a broad response from tenants. And once FHFA releases this request for information, in the coming weeks, there will be an urgent call from the National Low Income Housing Coalition and other organizations for renters to share their experiences. We expect housing industry groups like the Apartment Association and others who represent landlords to push back mightily against any federal renter protections. So we're calling for a robust response from tenants. You all are great at doing that. So NLIHC will release a sample comment letter for tenants to use. We'll also start hosting a weekly tenant protections working group every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, starting as soon as the FHFA releases this request for information. We'll be advocating for tenant protections against rent gouging, for just cause eviction standards, for improved habitability standards, and source of income protections against discrimination and other provisions. We'll also urge FHFA to ensure that these efforts are informed by people with lived experience throughout the process, that they advance racial and social equity, that they include strong enforcement, and that they're mandatory for all landlords and all properties. Again, it's not as helpful if these things are optional, right? So again, NLIHC will be releasing a lot of materials in the coming weeks, and we just wanted to give you all a heads up as we get all hands on deck soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla and Kim. And I do see a hand up, Mrs. B. If you had a question for Kim and Kayla about the FHFA comment.
Yes, Kayla, you did not mention accessibility for the disabled. I think that is a key component and it should be included in there as part of tenant protection. So I'm quite sure it was an oversight, but I just wanted to articulate that should be part of the request as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for flagging that, Ms. B. And that's going to be a vital point in the comments that NLIHC develops too. So thank you for making sure that, that is something that is included and central in the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. B. I see Miko has their hand up too.
Yes, and is there a way to make sure that there's some verbiage? It may or may not be, but we have some seniors that have cognitive issues, and I've been working with a senior that has cognitive issues. He's kind of a functioning mental person. He's programmed where he pretty much knows how he has to pay bills, different things, but his cognitive is only having a 3rd grade education. So when we're looking at seniors that have that, sometimes they don't have people that are their caregivers or have power of attorney, but making sure we have some type of a liaison up under the ADA Act, somebody that can actually help them if there's an issue, because they're not going to know if they're being discriminated against.
Yeah, really important point. Thank you so much for raising that, Miko. We'll have sample comment language to help folks, put together a comment that they'll want to leave, and if folks need help crafting that comment, we'll be more than happy to help out in any way that we can too. But thank you so much for raising that. That's a great important point, and we want to be sure that the voices of folks, older adults and people with cognitive issues all have their voices heard in this comment as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that.
Thank you so much again, Miko, for speaking up about that. And again to Mrs. B for bringing up the topic. And I don't see any other questions in the chat unless anybody else has their hands raised. But again, if y'all have any questions, oh, Claudia, I see your hand. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
My daughter right now has got mental health issues and she's chronic homeless. And it's like, I want to get her into a program that will help her, but she's just, I don't know. But anyway, she's got bipolar and she's lost a really good apartment because there's no case manager to work with her on things. And so it's like we're back to square one and trying to, work with her workers and stuff. I think a lot of these agencies should have at least some person that would help with the chronically homeless people with mental health issues, because it's really hard on us parents to deal with it, And she's with an agency, she's with Easter Seals, and, they're just there for the paycheck, basically. So she needs to get into some kind of housing situation where her housing is taken care of, or a good portion of it. She's been trying to get on vouchers, but they say her income is too high. And, you know, this is an ongoing thing here in Michigan with people with mental health issues. I've heard it from my TTI worker from CMH. So, you know, it's really a big problem in our state. So I just wanted to mention that.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Claudia. I'm so sorry that you and your family are going through that too. That is so difficult. Yeah, and you bring up a really important point too, right? About the necessity of really pairing housing with supportive services for those who need it to make sure that they can have long-term housing stability and the assistance that they need in order to, you know, remain safely housed and really get on their feet. I'm just so sorry to hear that you and your family are going through that. That sounds so hard.
Yeah, and I sent Courtney some poems that I wrote and with pictures, so for Tenant Talk, so their magazine or something. So I do a lot of artwork, so
Oh,
I
that's
just thought I just want to let somebody know. So
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Claudia. And we did get that stuff in too. So thank you for sending in the poems and the art. I do see Mrs. B has her hand up again.
Yes, Claudia, my heart goes out to you. I understand. I can empathize and sympathize with what you're going through. I here in New York, working with elected officials on the local level, state level, and the federal level to create legislation that would mandate that each housing development have a social worker that visits, a social worker and or psychologist that visits the development if twice a month or at least once a month. Because of the pandemic, it has elevated a lot of challenges for people. And we want to make sure that they are supported. So my heart goes out to you, and I'm recommending to everybody that's on the call who lives in a public housing development is to reach out to your elected officials and demand that this type of supportive service be available because it is needed and it could and would save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. B, for bringing that up and for your ongoing advocacy always. Always somebody I look up to be honest. You keep going, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you for everything you do.
I appreciate you and your team and everybody on. It takes a village. When we fight, we win. We can't stop.
Yes, 100%. Thank you. Okay, so we have Miko again, and that'll be the last one that we take for now so that we can make space for our second presenter. But thank you again, everybody. Miko, you're good to go.
Well, I was kind of chiming in on what she was saying about the mental health aspect. A lot of times they have organizations like Minard and PACE, like a community, you know, like a mental health worker. And I think a lot of times when they're dealing with the mental health issues, they fall short on the housing issues because they're more focused on pushing the initiative of medicines. And I think that some of them, maybe if it's a way that we could put some verbiage in place, even if they do have a housing or a mental health specialist, those people need to probably go through like a housing advocacy training. So now you're not dealing with just the mental health piece. You're also advocating to make sure this person keep their voucher if they went through a mental health crisis or anything of that nature, because with any medicine, their body can get dependent and they're not going to know that it's time for an increase or possibly a change. And then people are so quick to put them out. So if we don't have a person that you can just only diagnose me for my mental, I need for you to also advocate for me just as hard for my property, you know, where I'm at, and I won't be in a situation where I'm homeless. So maybe us getting those particular people going through some type of advocacy training so they can know how to properly, you know, for her situation. Because people don't understand mental health is real. And even the people that are family support system, it can be overbearing, and we can get caught up with just, you know, our own personal things, and mental health weighs a lot. So making sure that when we do get these people put in positions or get these places, we have the right people that you're going to advocate for me just as hard. So maybe, you know, putting some type of training together and making them be required. Even some of these, you know, case managers need to go through it, not just wait for a situation and they have to go through the ADA or maybe fair housing. But what about my case manager? Can she advocate for me? You know, do she know how to advocate for me? Don't just say, well, that's not my job description. I'm your caseload. So everything about me is your description. So maybe getting those proper tools in place of putting that in place.
I most definitely agree with that. And I'll be biased as a social worker. I will say we need more social workers out there because they do both. They do the, you know, the psychological part of it and the mental health part of it, but they're also trained to do like that advocacy part of it. Taking the NLIHC hat off and putting on like the social worker hat. But yeah, we definitely need more folks like that in the field.
Yeah, I mean, social workers have their work cut out, but at least if they get a little bit of advocacy training, especially because you're going to get more familiar with each case. So you're going to know every case. So you're going to know if this person is going to have a psychotic break. So then that way you can say, hey, you know, when this time of the year come on, you know, it triggers it. It could be death. It could be anything that, you know, make that mental come back and refresh. So just saying, hey, you know, this time just give them some space because this time that they might act out because this is what's going on. You know, that advocacy and having a person that can advocate for you, that's about the biggest thing that anybody can have, and doing it properly.
Yes, definitely agree with that, Miko. And thank you so much again for speaking up on that. Yeah, lots of good comments in the chat too, Miko, if you want to look through them and respond to them. But I'll go ahead and move us on to our next guest for today. We have Gina Wilt joining us from COHHIO. From Ohio, just to provide some background on their advocacy work and how y'all can engage not just in federal advocacy, but also at the local level, and a little bit about tenant protections too. There'll be a lot in there, but a lot of useful information. So thank you again, Gina, for joining us.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great.
It looks beautiful outside, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, it's better than my inside desk where I was before. And it's warmer out here, and I'm in Ohio. We do not get nice weather very often, so I'm taking advantage. And I'm going to try and share my screen here. Let's see. But to just comment while I'm finding where my share screen is, I love the idea of advocacy training. So Miko, you're going to be my new best friend because I think that is exactly what we need. All kinds of advocacy training, because there's so many different types of advocacy, and we want to train people to help other people, but then that people, they can advocate for themselves and be self-advocates. But it's always nice to have that extra housing kind of navigator, those very specific skills that you just don't think about, and someone might not think, oh, you need a training for it, but they've been incredibly useful. So love the idea. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here. Can you see my slideshow?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I am here to tell you that advocacy works. It absolutely works. You do have power. We have lots of people power, and you can impact change, and you will impact change. And I have seen advocacy change people's mind. I have seen advocacy work to change policymakers' minds and perspectives. I have seen advocacy work to change agency officials. They're going one direction, and I've seen advocacy turn them another direction. So advocacy works, and I've seen it work time and time again. The key ingredient is dedication. So dedicated advocates equals success. So really appreciate this opportunity to be able to share today. I'm Gina, and I'm the advocacy director for COHHIO. And let's see if it lets me switch slides. So this is COHHIO. We're the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio. And we're committed to making sure that everyone has a safe, decent, affordable, fair situation when it comes to their housing. So making sure that everyone has safe and accessible housing. And we have a multitude of programs that come together to make that happen. So it's all about that power in numbers. So we have lots of different programs that come together. The sole purpose to end homelessness, promote affordable housing. So some of those programs that you'll see highlighted there in those blue bubbles. And so, when we're talking about advocacy in the sense that I'm talking about advocacy, I don't know what that purple line is, if you guys can see that or not. A democratic society can't run without advocacy. So this is talking about the grassroots advocacy. So what is advocacy? Promoting a cause, promoting an idea, influencing a policymaker. Advocacy happens at all different levels, whether it's the local, state, or federal level, as well as the executive branch, the agency level, judicial branch, legislative branch. So all of those levels, that advocacy is important at all of those levels. But the bottom line, as you can see with this slide, is that a democratic society cannot run without the grassroots that are the gears that keep things moving. So I love this illustration because it really shows how we are working together, bottom-up approach, an organic way. Sometimes it's spontaneous. It's always genuine because it's what the people are asking for. But that is to me really what advocacy is, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So why does your voice matter? Because you have expertise, you have experience. And I think those words really in this situation are interchangeable. So you have expertise and experience, and you might be the only exposure, if you're talking to a policymaker, that they might have to what I say, the real world. You might be that person who shares something with them that they've never had that exposure before. So your story might be that key opening that produces actual change. So you have experience, you have expertise, and that is why your voice matters. I also included on here that politics are local, and working in government affairs for a while and working for state lawmakers, I can tell you from that experience, when they hear from their local community, it makes a difference. If they hear from 5-6 people about the same issue, it makes a difference. If a congressperson is getting letters and calls from a dozen people in their community, in their district, people that, are their constituents, it does make a difference. So The fact that you're local, that's power right there. That is the power. And it makes a really big difference when they're hearing it, and it's not, it's people going through the same experience, but they're different, right? And but they're still unified around that same one issue. And that's why they say politics are local, because that's when you have the impact, and that's when you can make the difference. So this next slide, this is the Ohio State House. If you ever want to come to Ohio and visit the State House, this is our rotunda. So I want to talk about relationship building and effective messaging. And so here on the next slide, where does advocacy start? So first step, you really need to determine what's your goal. What are you trying to do? Whose mind are you trying to change? Is this, what level are you needing to talk to your congressperson? Or are you needing to talk to a HUD official? Are you knocking on the right door? Whose door do you need to knock on? And that's very important too. Figuring out who really is the right person for you to talk to. And if you knock on someone's door and they are not interested, they don't return the message to you, or they maybe they just flat out don't like you, or flat out you're not going to change their mind. You feel like you're not going to change their mind. Then you need to figure out whose door can you knock on that's different. So just figuring that out is key. So educate yourself on your audience as well, so that when you go in to talk to this person, you can be a key influence. I always recommend go with the group. If you're going into a meeting, I love coffee breaks to meet with whoever you need to meet with. It's a little bit more informal, but if you're going into an office, into a meeting, that's fine. Go in with someone, go in with at least one other person, go in with 2 people, 3 people. That way you can have someone to hear what they're saying, right? You need to have it's power in numbers. And that way also at the end of the meeting, you can really get each other's perspective on what maybe resonated with that person that you're trying to influence. So, of course, you want to know what's going on as you're going into that meeting, what other things might be impacting their frame of mind. And you want to have a simple, effective message. And when you're going in with your group, it's important to have a plan. Who's going to speak? What are you going to say? And again, you have the utmost confidence in your story and your experience, and you have that expertise. And so just having that confidence going in, but knowing who's going to say what in that meeting is always really important. But again, we could do a whole separate webinar on messaging. But these are just kind of where does advocacy start? So these are a good start. Some more things to add to the list. Be prepared to share your experience, yes, with the utmost confidence, because you are the one with the expertise. And then we talked about this a little bit. So when you come out of the meeting, evaluate your arguments, fine tune your message. So what did you say that engaged them? And you'll know. And then how do you emphasize that in your next meeting? I always follow up after my meetings with notes or cards. And if you don't meet with the actual congressperson, or you're working at the state level with your state elected, you might talk to a staffer. Don't underestimate the power of the staffer. Build a relationship there. Maybe that staffer is the key person. So for instance, if you're trying to get something accomplished with HUD, and HUD's they're ignoring you, you might need to go to the congressional staffer and ask the congressional staffer to help you out with, making an impact with HUD. And so it's good to have those relationships and those people that you can talk to and call. So, if you're disappointed that you missed the congressperson, you had to talk to the staff person, make lemonade from that lemon and build a relationship there. Broaden kind of goes along with broaden your horizons if you need to reach out to. And then finally, if you walk away from anything from today, it's the 3 Ps. And the 3 Ps are stay persistent. You want to be persistent. That's the big one. Persistence is key. So when I've talked to you about people who I've worked on and we've changed their perspective, we've influenced them. It didn't happen overnight. Those things don't happen overnight. So you have to be persistent, but I say polite because sometimes things are a marathon, not a sprint, and persuasive. So persistent, polite, persuasive. Those are my 3 Ps that I hope you'll remember. So just to give you, how we're polite, persuasive, and persistent in Ohio, we use NLIHC handy dandy out of reach and gap information, and we share the facts. Here are the facts. Here's what's going on. And we break it down to the local level, and we really share what's going on and information. Wow, they are not getting this type of information. So if you're able to come to the table with resources like this, it makes a big difference. So this is, just a snapshot of Ohio here. We share things like this, which again, we get help on things like this from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And in Ohio, we really only have a couple of jobs out of the top 10 most common jobs in Ohio. We really only have a couple of jobs that give someone enough money to afford a modest 2-bedroom. We have a lot that are close, but really we only have a couple. And I think this one's old. So this is this is an old slide, but we've updated this since then. But just an example, because sometimes you talk to members, and this is a member that I was able to persuade, this member, I just don't understand, why we have this problem. And they need to see the numbers. They need to see it in black and white. And so being able to say, well, this is why we have the problem. Rents have increased in the last couple years. Rents have increased anywhere between 12% to 26% in Ohio. It's a range, but that rents have increased that much. Wages have only increased maybe 4 to 6%. So that's the gap. That's the missing piece. And so being able to put that in writing is really helpful. And of course, there it is. Rents are rising up. Eviction case filings. They went down when we had that moratorium for a little bit during COVID. You can see the dip. It went down barely. And even though there was supposedly a moratorium, we still had 2,000 evictions that month of the moratorium, but they're back up again. So really being able to show things like this is helpful. And of course, federal housing advocacy, same thing, same thing. We are using the same tools that you use for your local electeds, same tools that you would use for your HUD officials, same tools. These are people, they're the same. For the social workers, you have the advantage because you can use your social work skills as you're doing your outreach to legislators and policymakers. So in Ohio, here are some of our key federal contacts. These are people we build relationships with. And whether it's slow and just getting to know them over the years, or, phone calls, meetings, being a resource. We have, this is just a snapshot of some of the members. We are lucky that we get Marcia Fudge. She's from Ohio. I don't know if it helps us or not, but it's definitely nice to have cabinet members from Ohio. Does anyone do you guys recognize any of these people? Some of these this is the new senator for Ohio, JD Vance, which we have our work maybe cut out for us a little bit with JD Vance. I think that we can do it though. We can explain to him why housing is foundational, why we need housing first in order to help people with all the other issues that come across, and the economic benefit too with providing that foundational piece, which is housing. So
We also have a lot of Joyce Beatty fans in the chat.
yeah,
so-
we are really lucky to have Joyce Beatty. Yeah, we have some great members, and she's so active, and you would never know that she's in DC all the time because she's here in Ohio too. So I don't know where she gets her energy from. But yes, she is a force to be reckoned with for sure. And you never know. You just never know what the conversation's going to turn out to be. These are just samples of, we do a lot of roundtables, and I think the best advocacy is when you can get people out to meet where you are, meet where you live, see where you live, see what you do. And so we try to get members. These are state senators, Congress people. You see Sherrod Brown there too. We get them out into the community. You see Marcy Captor, to see what's going on firsthand. That is how we change perspectives. Because they don't know. And so until you bring them into your community to see it firsthand, we had a state senator who I was so nervous to bring to an event, and he actually said he just is not supportive of many of the issues we support, and I just thought, oh, this would not be good. But the state rep in his district was very supportive of housing. She actually has lived experience. Her mom was a domestic violence victim. And so, of course, she has that perspective. And so she's fantastic on our issues, but I had to invite him too, because you can't have a district event and not invite the whole delegation. At least that's how we do it. So made me a little nervous. I'm like, oh no, what's going to happen? What's he going to say? And he said, well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it, but maybe. So he didn't come right at the beginning, but he came late, and he sat down, and they gave him the mic, and I thought, oh no, where's this going to go? And the first thing out of his mouth was, that he was a foster. He was adopted. He was foster to adopted, and that he had he just told his whole life story. And I was shocked. Like, I had no idea that he had that experience. And he said, I know you think I don't care about your issues. He said, it's not that I don't care about them. They're just not my priority issues. But if you ever need help, you can come to me. He said, I'm still, he's a business caucus. That's his top priority, is business first caucus. And he has other priorities, tax issues. Those are his priorities. But he said, I do care, and I do understand, and I will help you on these issues. So you just never know what people are going to say in these meetings and what you're going to learn when you put them in a setting around other people who also have similar experiences. They start sharing. So I can't say enough about doing these tours and getting people out. This one down at the bottom, with Congressman Warren Davidson, who is a very conservative member. This is a school. It was an old junior high school that the community did not, it was turning into an eyesore, but at the same time it was vacant and nobody was going to school there for decades. But the community also didn't want to just tear it down. Nobody knew what to do with it. And they turned it into affordable housing. And so for him in this community, not necessarily knowing what he thought about affordable housing, but to see how well it worked in his own community, what a great way to change someone's mind. And to meet the residents that live there who are working hard and having, sharing their struggles, but they were able to save this building through low-income housing tax credits and other things. So I can't say enough about getting out and talking to people in the community. So I don't know. Yep.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make sure we had time for a question or two. So
Yep.
two more minutes or so.
Okay. Yeah. So, and that's probably better, just to answer questions, and I can talk more about, the tenant protection work, which is critical. I think we're making more ground on that at the local level than at the state level. But the importance of, and you talked about this earlier, we have our work cut out for us with tenant protections, and we need to learn how to talk about it better. We need to learn how to explain that protecting tenants doesn't mean we don't care about homeowners, because there's like this weird thing, oh, well, we want to only do home ownership. We don't want to, nobody should be renting anyway. Everybody should be owning a home. That's kind of the conversation in Ohio. Like, why do we even have renters? We should only have homeowners because everybody can own a home, right? So we need to learn how to talk about that. And we need to be ready. I think we need to be ready. They're coming after our tenant protections, or what we have right now, what we already have. They're coming after us, and we can't step backwards. We need to move forward. So I think it's better to have a proactive, be in a proactive situation than to be in that posture where we're just constantly defending ourselves. But yes, I think that's maybe a good place to stop, and I'm happy to ask questions or answer questions. I could ask questions too.
I was gonna ask a question too, but I did see one question that came in the chat from Karen Rhodes, and I think it was kind of relating to the data point that you were making earlier. And she asked, where are all these people who are being evicted or just on the move going, and where are they leaving from? Do we even have such concrete data that can be presented to the various powers that be?
That's a great question, and I'm not a data person. I would love to be that person, but that is definitely not me. But I will say that we break things down by county pretty much. We have our regions too, and every area of our state is different. But we had one small county, the smaller counties, it's easier somewhat if it's not too rural. You can't find people. You just literally can't find people. We had a couple that was living in a cave because this was the area of the state where we have caves. It was a young with their baby. And we had to, you had to find them. And, why we're standing for, we shouldn't stand for anyone to be homeless, but certainly not babies, certainly not families. And that's what's happening. They were evicted, and then they ended up in a cave. So every situation's different. We're seeing, I think, what everybody else is seeing, a lot of doubling up, tripling up, kind of to the unsafe levels. And we're, as the weather's getting warmer, we're seeing more people in their cars at night too.
Yeah, that cave story is also just like really scary too, just to like know there's like nowhere else to go.
And they were embarrassed. Yeah, they were embarrassed. It was a small community, and they, it was like people are not asking for help from their own people that they know, right? They'd rather go somewhere else where people don't know them. So that was, yes, not a good situation.
Let's see. Does anybody else have a question? Feel free to raise your hand too, if not.
I think Claudia has a question.
Oh yes, go ahead, Claudia. I'm so sorry. I can't see.
Okay. When I went to this, the Oakland County Board of Commissioners meeting, I read them "We're not cave dwellers, are you?" And I sent the paper and stuff, the picture and the poem, what I spoke on. And what the result of that is that the mayor of Pontiac and the commissioner of Pontiac went and they built a whole, every time that they're tearing down old houses, they're building new apartments, and they're allowing people with vouchers in them. They built a whole new section on, if you go, well, in Michigan, we have the Palace at Auburn Hills, but near there on Walton and Updike, they have a whole housing section on both sides of Walton, and that is nothing but people who need housing. And they're starting to work with the people that are in the shelters in Pontiac, and they built a whole new housing units there. And they're still working with the mental health issue people. But anyway, maybe Sid could send you a copy of my We're Not Cave Dwellers poem in that. So that's all I gotta say.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I would love to get a copy of that.
Yeah, I can definitely share that too. I have that somewhere. I'll look for it in a second, but I definitely have it somewhere. Thank you, Claudia, again, for sharing. Does anybody else have a question? Make sure I look through everybody. Okay. I did have one question for you, Gina, and actually two questions. But the first one is really just, I know you were mentioning, oh, we have someone on the phone. I don't know if they.
Hi,
Hello?
yeah, yes, hi, my name is Tanya. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, well, I wanted to share my story real quick. I have been experiencing unethical business practices by my HOA members and board members and their close acquaintances. And what has happened is they've had plumbers viciously break our toilets. We've had people stuff things into our HOA drains that causes floods. And all of these things are costing tens of thousands of dollars in hotel stays and repairs. And I get indirect threats from people on the HOA board saying that their family is on the board so they can do whatever the F they want to people. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the work that you guys do in regards to fair housing and treatment and affordable housing. I wouldn't wish this type of hardship on anybody. And I just think that, your work doesn't go unnoticed. And I just say, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing again. And thank you. And, thank you again for just sharing that story, because I think it's really touching on what we're talking about today with advocacy at all levels of government. And you're talking about just the HOA, which also can have a big impact in your life as you're sharing. So we hope this information is helpful in your advocacy journey and trying to, just address all those costs and what kind of is seeming like a really not friendly HOA board and situation. So thank you. Gina, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that too.
Yeah, just that don't underestimate the power of your state representative or your state senator. Just by, folks knowing that you're reaching out to them could make a difference. So, when I worked at the state level, we got inquiries about that. And what would my boss do? The senator, he would call over, and all of a sudden things started getting better. They're very strategic, and they know how to handle some of these situations sometimes. So it's definitely worth a shot. So I wouldn't underestimate the power of at least to help you get direction too. And they might be able to give you resources. They should be able to help you get some resources. So make sure a lot of people don't even know who their their state rep, or, you know, might know who your congressperson is, probably know who your US senators are, which they're important too. But you should, you know, find out who your local people are, because they're elected to help you. That's literally their job, is to serve, and they want to. So if they hear from you, sometimes it works.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gina. And thank you so much, Tanya, for that question. We're at 7 already, so I won't hold people for too long, but I do want to thank Gina for joining us today and helping us learn a little bit more about advocacy. And thank you to Kim and Kayla too, who joined us earlier to talk about the FHFA comment. Thank you. But I'll go ahead and just wrap us up. As always, if y'all have any questions for me or have suggestions on how to improve this webinar and future topics, please feel free to email me at sbetancourt@nlihc.org. We'll be having our next Tenant Talk live on June the 5th on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. It should be on section 3, which is really exciting. We're still waiting to hear back about speakers for that, but regardless, it should be a good conversation. And we're also going to be having an extra Tenant Talk live in June. We originally canceled the second one because of Juneteenth, but we're going to have one on June 10th just to help you all do the FHFA comment, and you'll have time to kind of work with that together. It'll think of it as kind of like a, you know how people have phone banking parties. We're going to make this like a comment party where we can all come together and answer your questions live if you have any. And you can view the schedule right now. It's not updated yet, but we do have the Tenant Talk live schedule for you all that I can post in the chat shortly. But as always, we're still looking for blog authors, guest authors for the On the Home Front blog. And if you're interested in being a part of that and telling your story as somebody with lived experience in federal housing advocacy, you can feel free to email outreach@nlihc.org. And for those that have Facebook, we also have a Facebook page that you can join. And then again, we're having a cover art contest. I know some of you folks already expressed that you submitted your art, so thank you for that. But if you want to submit your artwork for the next issue of Tenant Talk on LGBTQ issues in housing and homelessness, we'll have that link for you in the chat. And of course, if you want to be part of our next tenant leader cohort, we're also going to drop that interest form in the chat for you. And we're going to have our next session on June 10th, which is a Saturday at 11 a.m. Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you again, Gina and Kayla and Kim for joining us. Our next Tenant Talk will be on June 5th, and we'll see you then. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. B. Bye, everybody.